When it was released in 1997, the original Final Fantasy Tactics earned its place as one of the strongest entries to date in the strategy RPG genre, and in the years that followed, it has received so many commendations that critics and fans haven't been shy about placing it alongside games like Final Fantasy VI, VII and X when it comes to discussing placement and general consensus around which are the best Final Fantasy games ever made. Unlike those other games, however, part of Final Fantasy Tactics' allure came from its lack of availability. During its initial run, it was, for example, never released in PAL territories like Europe and Australia, and after the PlayStation was discontinued, whereas many other games have been re-released numerous times so fans can enjoy them on more modern systems, Final Fantasy Tactics has only seen one major port, dubbed The War of the Lions, which was first released on the PlayStation Portable before then being ported to iOS and Android devices. It's why the initial announcement of Final Fantasy Tactics, the Ivalice Chronicles, was met with so much goodwill amongst the community, as it will be released on every major platform, and was said to come with numerous enhancements to both presentation and gameplay. But as to how well those changes manifest in real terms, well, that's why I'm sure you're here, to find out. With that in mind, a few disclaimers before we start this review. A Steam copy of Final Fantasy Tactics The Ivalice Chronicles was provided to us for free ahead of launch for the purposes of conducting this review, and all the opinions you're about to hear are our own. No one at Square Enix has had any input over anything said in the video. The bulk of our session was spent on playing the game's enhanced mode on Night difficulty, although some time was spent on Classic mode too. And that will then serve to colour this review, which will take a deeper look into how the enhanced mode improvements stack up. It should also be noted that due to this being a review of a game that was released almost 30 years ago, spoiler territory is a bit grey. In spite of that, we're aware that people who have never played Tactics will be watching this review, so we won't be delving into specifics relating to the story, and the majority of the footage you see will be from trailers released by Square Enix or official B-roll. The review will be structured as follows. We'll look at gameplay, presentation, before a lighter touch on the story, and then a conclusion. But with that, let's dive in. The two creative leads behind Final Fantasy Tactics were Yasumi Matsuno and Hiroyuki Ito. Both had developed gameplay systems of note, with Matsuno being the brain behind the system used in Tactics Ogre, whereas Ito had been the mastermind behind the popular active time battle system that, after being introduced in Final Fantasy IV, had become what the main numbered entries were known for. Numerous options were available when planning Tactics out, but they ended up moving away from the ATB system, opting to create what became known as the charge time battle system instead. In layman's terms, this was a conditional turn-based battle system, but what separated it out from, say, the 8-bit Final Fantasy games, or indeed Mystic Quest, was the possibility of certain characters not being able to perform their moves with immediate effect. These moves instead needed to be charged, with the delivery affecting the broader turn order. To add further layers, characters were able to move freely around an isometric battle scene, something that could also affect gameplay, as some abilities had an intimate link with distance, and others could only be enacted on specific tiles as opposed to units themselves, which, if the player was lucky or unlucky, could alter what happened when the ability was performed after the charge time, as the intended target may have moved. These elements helped to create a compelling gameplay system that had strategy at its very core, and these notions were then complemented by an adaptation of the job system that had undergone significant development. Ito had not played a massive role in the development of any of the 8-bit era Final Fantasy games, but his DNA was all over the job system used in Final Fantasy V. This system was then combined with the class system from Tactics Ogre, and it saw the creation of a job tree, whereby instead of just unlocking new jobs as the story progressed, they now became available following progression with a previous job or a combination of jobs. And once skills associated with these jobs had been learned, they could then be used in conjunction with another job's skills, without limitation. When these elements were combined, it created a system that afforded a lot of freedom to players in terms of how they wanted to set their characters up, and how they then wanted to use those characters to solve the puzzles the game presented in the form of random or fixed encounters. Much of this has stood the test of time well, and the Ivalice Chronicles makes no major changes to the jobs outside of some tweaks in terms of how jobs are learnt and also the cost of abilities. But numerous adjustments have been made to ensure the experience is much smoother than it was before. You can now, for example, see the turn order without having to dig into specific menus, something which was, of course, present in Final Fantasy X. And it's also possible, thanks to the new preview option, to see how effective intended actions will be, and how they will affect turn order. Some might say this removes the essence of the original, but these quality of life adjustments help to make the game more satisfying, as players are no longer punished by uncertainty, at least in the same way. You can still, for example, plan everything out, make sure an offensive spell will land before the target character has their turn and can move out of range, only for the casting character to die before they are able to cast a spell. The developers have also attempted to remove other minor annoyances, such as the terrain blocking clear vision to certain tiles on the standard isometric map view. This has been solved by the new Tactician mode, which presents a more top-down view with a flattened landscape. It's a welcome addition, but it does have one slight annoyance. When Tactician mode is selected, you can't take actions, so you can sometimes end up in situations where you have to keep switching between the regular view and Tactician view to make sure your characters are going to A, move to the correct tile, or B, their actions are going to affect the intended tile. Each of these changes, on the whole though, only add to the spectacle, and as the name suggests, enhance the gameplay experience, which honestly is still as smooth as it always was. A big part of this then relates to presentation. Matsuno was adamant when the game was being first developed that tactics had to be played at 60 frames per second as a minimum. As that camera swung around, if there were any frame drops, he felt it would ruin the immersion. The PSP version struggled with this requirement, but here everything is crisp, and you can rotate around the diorama maps through 360 degrees as much as you want to assess the battlefield and plan out your actions with ease. Even when the original game was released, its presentation was stylistic as opposed to trying to push boundaries like Final Fantasy VII, and that essence has been retained, with everything being reworked to ensure the original vision is maintained, whether you're playing on Classic mode, which is even closer to the original, or in Enhanced mode, which tries to do a lot more lifting by introducing better lighting, smoother graphics, and a broader colour palette. It will all come down to preference though, as the original is more gritty in almost every way. But there are some clear benefits to the Enhanced mode visual style. That notion also translates to audio. Those who play in Classic mode will see the game play out using the War of the Lions script as opposed to the original PlayStation script. In Enhanced mode, the War of the Lions script has been used as a base, with modifications made to ensure everything flows better, something that was necessary due to the addition of voice acting. This ends up being a bit of a catch-22 though. There was just something about playing tactics and having that text scrolling sound effect play while reading the various lines of dialogue yourself. Not many other pre-voice acting Final Fantasy games used a similar approach, and at the time, it helps to create an extra sensory layer. When playing in Enhanced mode, due to the voice acting being present, the sound effect was deemed unnecessary, and so it's been removed. Your mileage with the voice acting will then depend on your penchant for listening to ye olde English as opposed to reading it. But for those who are enthused, then what's on offer is of high quality. The only time this errs sometimes is during the battles themselves. When prominent characters are performing special abilities, they will have extra lines of dialogue as a way of building up what they're about to do, but this can sometimes get a bit monotonous. It's perhaps for this reason that text-only versions of this were removed from the War of the Lions version, but thankfully, if you feel as though the battles are dragging on a bit too much, you can always make use of the fast forward function that has been introduced. You just have to be mindful that the battles then don't pass you by and force you into a sticky situation. That then brings us on to the narrative. This was one of the aspects that endeared Final Fantasy Tactics to so many people back when it was released, as the story centered around humanity fighting amongst itself. And this was a pretty significant departure from what had been the standard Final Fantasy narrative up until that point. At the center of everything is Ramza Beolve, a young noble who serves as the eyes and ears of the player, and also their moral compass in the harsh and unforgiving world of Ivalice. No major changes have been made to the scenario, so those worried about the Ivalice Chronicles doing a wholesale revisionist retconning should rest easy. But as mentioned, changes have been made to the script of the enhanced version, and while this has largely been done to make everything flow better owing to the addition of voice acting, modifications have also been made to ensure certain plot elements are more clearly signposted. Key factions and individuals are name-dropped with a higher degree of frequency, and to complement this, the encyclopedia will update over time to reflect the current state of each character, and the State of the Realm feature, which was first used in Final Fantasy XVI, has been ported over. Given that the story of Tactics is quite dense and people have been studying and analysing it for decades, these features are very welcome, and they will help to make everything much more digestible. The major downside of this whole package though comes from decisions around content. Yes, there are some minor nitpicks around some of the new functionality and compromises that have needed to be made to accommodate for that new functionality. But given the omission of the vast majority of content that was introduced with the War of the Lions version, it's hard to call this the definitive version of the game. There will always be those who prefer Balthier and Luso as guest characters in comparison to Cloud and Aerith, and those that lament that all the new events that were introduced in the War of the Lions have been removed, alongside the multiplayer modes and the Dark Knight and Onion Knight jobs. Square Enix has attempted to justify this by stating that they wanted the Ivalice Chronicles to be a faithful reproduction of the original PlayStation version, but that objective could have simply been fulfilled via Classic mode, with Enhanced mode then being used to build upon the War of the Lions version, and potentially even adding some new content for returning fans to enjoy, either in the form of some new jobs, a new bonus dungeon, some new powerful equipment to obtain, or even a new super boss to overcome. It means that, content gripes aside, Final Fantasy Tactics: The Ivalice Chronicles does fulfill the objective of having the original game playable on modern systems, and as fans, we should be thankful for that. It's taken a long time to get to this point, but what's been delivered is a very faithful recreation of the original PlayStation release, with plenty of quality of life adjustments introduced to make the transition a little bit easier for those who are coming in fresh. But with that, thank you so much for listening to this review of Final Fantasy Tactics: The Ivalice Chronicles. We hope you found it useful. As a European, my first experience playing Tactics was via Tactics Advance, before then playing through War of the Lions on my PSP 1000, and I still remember those horrible frame rates and being save locked multiple times. Either way, we'd love to hear in the comments below whether you're thinking about getting the Ivalice Chronicles, and if you are, which aspect of the game you're most looking forward to. Alright everyone, with that, this is Daryl signing out. As always, I'd like to give a big thank you to all of our Patreon and YouTube membership supporters, especially Benjamin Snow, Christopher Gardner, Clever Chavez, EXP Required on YouTube, Frederick Forrest, Gregory and Stephen, who are super special Onion Knight supporters, and of course a big thank you to everyone for watching this video. I'll see you all again soon for more Final Fantasy goodness.